Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and Madhouse Toys has let me borrow a KFC heavy metal Doubledeck set to handle, review, and hopefully not break. This is the second release of the design, coming in between the two Transistor releases, and it includes a pair of KFC cassette bots named Stinger and Mandy. The package is kind of awesomely compact for everything it includes. Also, spoiler alert, I didn't break anything before I passed this back over to Madhouse HQ. Given that this is KFC and it features cassettes, that is a very pleasant thing to report right up front. I've never handled Transistor, so this review is going to also be my main thought dump on KFC's Masterpiece Blaster-alike. And to start off, his boombox mode totally looks the part. From the front. It's stretched out horizontally more than one might expect, but I find that gives it more visual legitimacy as a retro portable music player. From behind, Doubledeck's alt mode doesn't look bad so much as suspiciously technological and uneven. There's something kinda weird about it. But hey, I can easily distract myself with neat touches like the sculpted dials and control twiddle boopers on either side of the boombox. They don't really do anything, but they help maintain the illusion from more than one frontal angle. You can also press a button to pop the tape door open. There are tapes inside. You can store up to 3, more on that later. Anyway, in general, this looks pretty good. It's a friggin' boombox. It towers, it powers, it bebops, it rock steadies. It makes me just want to pick it up and go for a run down at the beach. Oh dear. Okay, I shouldn't look down there. Hey, how about we transform him into a robot? When you peel open the front panels of Doubledeck's boombox mode, you can see just how much of a robot fillet there is to reform within. And that's the gist of this transformation for the most part. While there are certainly a few clever moments of plastic enfoldery, you're going to spend a lot of time wrapping swathes of panels around Doubledeck's limb skeleton to re-solidify those masses into the limbs of a bipedal robot man. Once you've got the legs all fixed up, the groin mooshes together with a number of clicks and tabs that can come apart again quickly enough to make me frown at those aforementioned clicks and tabs. C-clips, guys, C-clips! Anyway, where the legs mostly wrap themselves up in their panels, the arms do a little bit more interlayered stacking. All things considered, this is pretty intuitive for such a specifically ordered conversion segment. It could have gone a whole lot more frustrating, especially since the instructions are for going robot to boombox, and Doubledeck is packaged in boombox mode. By the way, Doubledeck's weapons store in his alt mode in such a way that they kinda need to be slowly removed over the course of the transformation. In fact, it's pretty damn risky to try and dislodge them or install them out of order. As the final panels curl up to tighten up the backpack area, Doubledeck's head flips out as predictably as you could expect. But his ears! Don't forget to adjust his ears. Somebody might shout at you if you don't. Like I said, I never messed with Transistor, but his redeco semi-clone Doubledeck cuts a badass twin-cast silhouette. He's a big blue DJ robot made of blocks. From the back he gets a bit more panelish and toyetic, but I am into his overall shape despite its spots of jank. He's got a load of lovely paint to accentuate the sculpted detail on his legs, and to be honest, the insides of his legs end up looking more visually complicated than most of the rest of his body. But it's not like I'd want all that detail everywhere, especially not up on his head sculpt, which is dripping with cartoon-styled smoothness and simplicity. For an unofficial Masterpiece-alike figure, this is the kind of thing I'm glad to see get nailed so solidly. Now, I really like the solid sky blue eyes, but if you want deeper blue light-piped eyes, all you have to do is peel the head open and swap in the alternate optic plank. It's okay. It's a little too deep of a blue to blaze up satisfyingly for a light pipe piece. In fact, it ends up looking darker than the solid sky blue optic piece did in the first place. I'm not a fan, especially since a screw needs to be spiraled in and out to peel the head apart either way. Neither am I a fan of screwing and rescrewing in order to use the alternate comic-ish, toy-ish head sculpt that you can swap in, but that's only because the cartoonish head sculpt is so good. If yellow eyes, more silver, and a nose guard are your bag, then Doubledeck absolutely has you covered. It's a great alternate head, it's just a replacement for a piece that I don't really want to replace, you know? Anyway, those gun bits. There's a barrel and a body and a barrel and a body. They're big blaster-esque kablammers, dual-wieldable if you want to go that route, which use the tried-and-tested palm slot connection method in order to thankfully not rely on articulated fingers to hold the accessory in place. There's no clear spot to store either gun when Doubledeck isn't waving them around, and I couldn't figure out a way to use the alt mode storage in his robot mode. Admittedly, I didn't try too hard. That stuff's cramped KFC plastic still spooks me a little bit, and I did have to give this back after I was done. Anyway, this pair of goofy trumpet thingies is the quote-unquote pre-order bonus from Transistor, which has so far been present on every single release of the toy since. Flip the hands around to reveal their peg-on hard points, and you can set Doubledeck up with some brass power honk blasters. It's a well-done extra. I'd probably never use them after filming this B-roll footage, but they sure look nice. Perhaps most magnificently of all, you can wiggle Doubledeck's ears, so he can be sad, or perky, or neutral. His head can also look left and right, and it's on a separate hinge to look up and down, so it's not a ball joint, which means there's no tilt. Just nodding and shaking. Yes or no. As for his shoulders, they are on smooth friction joints to go forward and backward, smooth friction joint to go outward. And then there's a double-hinged elbow, but it's not double-hinged to give you double-hinged articulation. No matter what you do, you get about 90 degrees out of it. It's either going to be 90 there, or like 90-ish there. That's about it. His wrists can straight up swivel, and then their transformation joint offers a decent little bit of this for whatever you may use that for. And he's got very KFC hands. Surprise, surprise. I really like the design of these hands. They splay out gorgeously, and the kind of meaty stubbiness of the fingers looks incredibly on topic. I dig it. There's a big cut ball joint here that can go down here or up here. There's a hinge and a hinge. So this guy can give a pretty good thumbs up. Each finger has a small, thin ball joint connection to the knuckle, which allows for a bit of splay. And then they can hinge and hinge to curl up, and then ball joint in for that kind of deal, so he can be all shaka bra. There's only one problem with these hands, and it's that they feel just a tad loose. They are able to hold position, but if you bump them, they will go. They won't fight back, they will just go. And they have just a little bit too much looseness for my taste. I wish they were about 10 to 15% tighter. One could do that oneself with some floor polish or whatever in the ball joints, I'm sure, but I was hoping they would be closer to the experience I had with the MP Ultra Magnus hands. Also, you know, it's KFC. They don't feel fragile. I've not seen any major stress marks or anything, and I've been playing with them pretty heavy. When you're transforming them back, like, you're going to want to make sure that it's like this, or something might catch inside that cavity, and then stuff could rip off. But they're okay hands, just a little looser than what I would have liked. He's got a straight-up waist swivel, and then he's got a bunch of articulation on his legs, like ratcheting forward. It goes about this far, but then there's a hinge on the skirt, so it can go up a bit more. My understanding is the original Transistor did not have that hinge, so whoever has that version of the toy, I'm sorry to inform you that upgrade is on the new flat red one coming out soon. There is, anyway, a ratcheting joint this way. Makes a terrible noise on that hip. Makes a slightly better noise on that hip. You can also ratchet outwards. And that's a real heavy, clicky ratchet. You notice how I'm holding his pelvis together, because, you know, there's a flat back here. Usually I just keep it up so I can keep a grip on both sides. In the transformation, these things, you know, these come together very slightly to tab the pelvis together. They are what holds the pelvis together. There's not really any connection inside of it. These are such heavy ratchets. If you're just holding this guy, I'm like, I'm going to pose his legs. Woo, he's going to kick. Yeah. This stuff is all, like, coming loose. And if you're holding him by his legs and doing things, eventually that happens. The upside is, hey, look, you can tweak all of these these resistances yourself inside of there. The downside is his crotch likes to split apart a little bit more than what I'd have liked. It's because these are just like friction connections and not like clip-in connections. Anyway, there's a thigh swivel, which is just straight up loose and smooth, and maybe a little bit looser than what I'd have liked. There is a third kind of ratcheting noise for the knees, which bend about 90-ish, maybe 93 degrees. And then the ankles can tilt really well, and they can do that, but they can't go up. If you want to have his leg like this, but solidly on the ground, you can use the heel strut to kind of stilt him onto the ground a little bit, but there's no forward ankle articulation, only like a backward ankle articulation. He's also got this cassette deck inside of his belly, and you can hold 3 cassettes in there, and what are you doing in here? Get TFC. Anyway, I took a cassette out. What do I want to do now? Use that switch on the back to push the other ones forward. That pushed forward pretty hard. So, the recommendation I've seen is that if you're going to use that, hold the front together so that it just pushes calmly into there, and then you can deploy the last... Well, that one didn't mount very well. Get onto... There you go. Deploy the last cassette. And look, there's like a thing inside his chest. Anyway, it works alright. It works about as well as Masterpiece Soundwaves, which is to say, slightly janky. But he comes with 2 cassettes. That's not bad for a package deal. So let's check these out right now. Stinger and Mandy are references to an unused Autobot cassette concept from the Transformers the movie script and the dimension-hopping pop star Kiss player Rosanna, respectively. As cassettes, they look as most modern higher-end takes on G1 cassette bots look. That is to say, if they aren't Masterpiece Laserbeak, they look like a heavily fractured cassette-shaped chiclet, often with a highly suspicious amount of flattened robot mode detail on the other side. There's nothing terribly wrong with that. Like I said, it's quota. At least these two are generally smooth-surfaced. They also include clear purple Energon box cassette cases if that storage plan is up your alley. Mandy is the same toy as Fader and Hi-Fi, neither of which I've messed with before, so hey, it's a pretty cool transformation. There are a few tiny flap-fold moments entirely for slightly cleaner robot aesthetics, and a really weird moment where the instructions imply some kind of S-curved zigzag extensions on the shoulders, but the shoulders don't actually pull out much at all, so it just doesn't happen. Stinger has no engineering source material to draw from, so he showcases how far KFC construction has come in having a transformation that, had the toy been produced a year or two ago, probably would have left you with a handful of broken and snapped ball socket stems. This is a real solid transformation, folding and stacking layers to blossom a scorpion out of a flattened brick. Getting all the little legs out can be just enough fiddly engineering to cross the line of patience for some, but once you've crossed that bridge, it's fairly smooth sailing. Once again, the instructions mention something that doesn't actually happen in the transformation, in a final 180-degree midsection spin, but this time it's pointless more so due to some miscommunicated paint apps on the claws. Mandy makes for a great-looking posability-enhanced G1 Autobot cassette biped. The shoulders and chest are rather retro-blocky, while the midsection and legs have a more modern, sleekened swish to their appearance. Sadly, she's also got a big head-shaped cavity in her spine, as nothing really takes the place of her skull once it's flipped up into its bot mode position. Mandy's colors are fairly simple, but the sky blue detail linings and cute pair of heart tampos on her shoulder do a lot to add to her identity. She includes a pair of Dayglow firearms for shooting love at her foes from afar, and if you don't dig her stylized, toyish head sculpt, there are 2 other options. One is basically More Than Meets the Eye Rewind, while the other is based on Eject and Rewind's G1 cartoon appearances. They can swap around using a simple peg-on connection, but the 2 spare heads lack any of the cassette mode tampagraphing on their rear surfaces, making them stick out a whole lot more when folded away for transformation. I'll note right here, Mandy does not include a microphone, and it is a crime. But Stinger's not a crime, he's the real star of this set, with a damn fine scorpion mode for a transforming cassette bot. Slightly oversized claws and a fat mechanical tail skew his style in a mecha direction, but it all totally works in my opinion. His proportions are wonderful, his colors are loud. It's a loud red on a loud blue and they contrast loudly. Thankfully, his teeny little optics are colder in tone, which brings a strange sort of balance to the whole thing. Mandy's head is straight up pegged on, so it's got a straight up, just left and right swivel. The transformation joint can be used for a bit of looking up and down, but not too far up or it starts to look weird. Her shoulders are ball socket jointed onto these, like, hinges. They are ball jointed onto hinges that let them do this, which looks terrible, and then I can't get them to really stop in between very easily. Like, there's a ton of friction in there when I do that, and they kind of want to bounce off. I don't know, I feel like these were supposed to extend out somehow, and they don't. Like, the instructions even mention folding them out in a kind of, like, S-curve. I don't get it. They don't. They mostly just go forwards and backwards, and they can go in and out like this if you want, but then there's a joint right here. So what's all this? I don't get it. There's a double-jointed elbow, so you can have a full-on arm curl, which is lovely, and then a ball-jointed wrist with a little bit of conical motion. There's no waist joint, and that really bummed me out, because I'd somehow convinced myself there was a waist joint on this design, and there isn't. And I kind of wish there was. The hips are ball socket connected up into the groin area, so you get decent range of outward motion and a little bit of forward, but there's also like a hinge, two hinges there actually, so you can kick all the way up with those. Looks a bit weird down here, but for a toy this small, I'm really cool with that. Like, it just kind of, all these joints just blend together into the shape of a thigh, and I think it looks pretty sharp. All that jointing continues into the knees, where, due to the cut in the back, you can get a very tight, really awesome-looking double-jointed degree of knee bend on just a single joint. And the ankles are ball-jointed. They've got a lovely amount of tilt, a lovely amount of forwardness. They got backness, too, if you want. I really like the design of Mandy, who I believe is also Fader and whatever his name is. If there was a waist joint, I would call this, like, just legit right up there. As it is, it's still pretty good. Just the lack of a waist joint for this, I guess, feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. Stinger has got ball joints on all 6 of his little legs, and they have varying degrees of motion. There's also a hinge at the top of each of his little legs. His tail can move backwards, and then there's a mid-tail joint for this, and the little stingy part can wiggle. And then he's got a waist joint, which is... There's a story behind that, according to the instruction book I'll get to in a bit. His shoulders have got a connection there, and then another connection there. So there's 2 joints, and then a ball joint connecting each claw. And then the claws can open and close, and there's a little bit of, like, spiky stuff in there. This is a good little toy, and it feels way more solid than what I would expect from a KFC cassette with 6 tiny ball-jointed legs, given my track record of experience with KFC cassettes. This is the kind of thing that a couple years ago would have crumbled to dust in my hands. So, legit, this feels pretty good. The only bummer is, that's some cassette stuff up there on his claws. That's stuff that matches his Scorpion mode color scheme on the bottom of his claws. The instructions imply that you are to do this at the end of his transformation, except that these would all be in the wrong place. So if you do this, then that's alright, but then the claws are flipped. If you want him to look quote-unquote accurate, you can flip the claws around like this. And now you get a look at his intended color scheme. But then if you try to take him back to cassette mode, all of these bits don't quite match up, or if you flip it around, then all the inner bits don't quite match up. So, I don't know, like, see, this bit here is now red, and on this side it's got the orange, vice versa. Something went backwards in the construction of this guy, and I'm not sure what. I thought at first, oh, I can just swap these ball-jointed parts, it'll all be kosher, but somehow it isn't, and I'm probably just missing some real simple geometric thing. Anyway, it's a super minor complaint because I honestly don't really care. It's just a bummer when I see, you know, clearly an intent that got messed up in production. My favorite and least favorite aspects of Doubledeck both include the build quality. Like, this is the most solid KFC piece I have ever handled that isn't just a pair of hands. And yet, I feel like his own hands don't feel quite as solid as those very standalone hands that remain standouts to me. Stinger and Mandy are categorically the best cassettes KFC has ever made, and speaking as somebody whose general experience with that subline has been a roller coaster of disintegration and disappointment, their strong builds are huge to me. But the improvements also make me look at all the little bits of rickety jank on Doubledeck himself and worry that this might be KFC's ceiling. Because while their stuff can finally hang, their stuff still doesn't hang near the top, despite how prolific their release lineup still tends to be. But can Doubledeck hang with masterpieces and masterpiece alikes? Absolutely. He's got the size and the Toy Toon fusion aesthetic that isn't top of the line, but sits happily somewhere in the middle. And it goes without saying that this is a goddamn package of toy. One main piece, 2 partner pieces, and accessories throughout. The asking price is filled out with loads of plastic meat, and the build quality is at just the right level to not make me feel like there'd be a ton of regret after purchase. But man, Keith Fantasy, I know your production lines can push it a little harder and put together an even higher quality product. The design work is good enough to warrant it. Do the extra passes, run the extra quality control, and legitimately challenge the upper echelon of solidly built unofficial transforming robot toy efforts. Realize this fantasy! Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and if you just want a flat red version of this toy with the Doubledeck fixed hip skirts, have I got good news for you. If you early adopted the metallic red version, I hope you like your metallic red paint.